So, have you ever found yourself in conversation with someone and you're explaining something that you know very well, but as you're explaining it, you suddenly become aware of something new about yourself, a truth that you maybe hadn't realized? This happened to me the other day, actually. I was having a conversation with a congregant, and at one point he asked me, in a much more sophisticated way than I'm about to paraphrase it, he said, "What's your deal?" Like I said, it was much more sophisticated in the conversation. But what he was really asking me was, like, who am I? And how does who I am inform, how I approach theology and Torah, just light little topics like that. And so I told him about my background in theater, my training as a Maggid, as a Jewish storyteller, and then we discussed this penchant I have, or this predisposition, to try to bring every story back to Bereshit, whether Bereshit is quite literally Genesis or its origin point. And this is something my classmates lovingly make fun of me for, but it's something that I really enjoy doing. And as I was explaining this to him, I said this: I do this because if I can reinsert myself and the story back to its beginning, then I can imagine other outcomes, other endings, other possibilities, and other meanings. And until that moment, I didn't really actually realize why I did this. And so, in synagogues across the country, darshanim of all sorts, rabbis, rabbinical interns, guest speakers, hazans, etc., might be inclined to begin their drashot like this. This week's parsha is Chaye, or the life of Sarah, and paradoxically, this week's parsha begins with her death. Does this sound familiar? Yes, exactly. But it's true. So this is the first line of this parsha. V'yihiyu Chaye Sarah me'a shana ve'esrim shana v'sheva shanim shenei Chaye Sarah. Sarah's lifetime, the span of Sarah's life, came to 127 years. So while it is true that our parsha, called the life of Sarah, begins with her death, what I find myself more interested in is, what does starting this way allow us to do? As Danish theologian Søren Kierkegaard once wrote in his journals, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. By starting with the end of Sarah's life, we are given an opportunity to better understand who she was by revisiting some of the episodes of her life captured in Torah. So there's the major one, right? Leaving the land of Ur to travel to Canaan with Abraham and his father. While they are traveling, leaving Ur to go to Haran, initially, Abraham's father dies, Terach. And there, Abraham has his Lech Lecha moment, and God calls to him. It's like, you keep going to Canaan. So she travels with him towards Canaan, and during their travels, 2 times she has to pretend to be his sister, to be taken, in a very euphemistic sort of way, by local monarchy into harems of sorts. Once they get through all of that, eventually she convinces Abraham to have a child with Hagar, her servant, and then she herself has a child at the age of 90. And these are just some of the episodes that Torah gives us of Sarah's life. And when I think about her life in this way, as it's presented by Torah, one of the things that I ask myself is, how? How was she able to endure so many challenging moments and still find the courage and the fortitude to keep moving forward? You'll notice that I didn't mention the Akedah, which is the end of the previous parsha, as one of Sarah's key episodes. Because the way Torah tells the story, she wasn't there, or she was unaware of what was happening. And yet, the beginning of this parsha, the very next one after the Akedah, begins with her death. And the rabbinic imagination has a field day with this particular layout of events. There are no shortage of midrashim that connect Sarah's death to the Akedah, but I want to focus on one in particular. And it suggests that after the Akedah, after Isaac came down from the mountain, he went to visit Sarah. And she's like, "Where have you been?" And he was like, well, I was on a mountain with Papa, almost died. This is a paraphrase of the Midrash, to be clear. And she says to him, so if the angel hadn't stopped Abraham, you would have been slaughtered. And Isaac says, yes. In at least 3 places in Torah reminds us that Sarah is unable to bear children for Abraham. And one verse even refers to her as akara, or barren. This desire to and this inability to have a child starts before they ever leave the land of Ur, when she is still, in fact, Sarai. It is a persistent circumstance of their story. And Torah's repeated mentions of this, combined with Sarah's by any means necessary approach, leads me to believe that she loved Isaac early on, long before it was ever clear she would have a son of her own. In the Midrash that I mentioned, after Isaac answers in the affirmative, Sarah utters 6 cries and dies. This suggests to me that the potential loss of her son, the preemptive grief of her favored one, the one whom she loved above all else, is what killed her. And conversely, it is this love for Isaac, for the possibility of what can be, for belief in what could be, that kept Sarah going through her fear and her doubt, her apprehension, her distrust in God, and through the unimaginable circumstances that Genesis tells us that she went through. This love for Isaac, this unknown, sustained her, it nourished her, and it allowed her to reach the season of her life where she could see that love made tangible. And because she persisted, not only was there Isaac and Rivka and Jacob and Rachel and Leah, now there's the rest of us. Her persistence gave birth to a people. So this Shabbat and beyond, I want to invite you all to think about your why. Not in the Simon Sinek sort of find your why, but the why as in that intrinsic, often intangible reason for doing what it is you do. And I don't mean purpose necessarily, I think that's a different conversation. I'm talking about this. When the going gets tough and the tough get going, what is it that keeps you going? That's your why. Maybe your why is love, a love of what could be or a love of what is. Maybe it's a hope that things can change. Maybe your why is spite. That can be a powerful motivation unto itself. And maybe in this moment, you don't know exactly what it is. And that's okay. That's great, actually. Because like I said, this invitation extends beyond just this Shabbat. But Sarah's why, her deep love for Isaac, allowed her to do, among other things, become the mother of a people. And we may not always know exactly where we're going, how we're going to get there, or what the impact of our actions will be. But may each of us be blessed with a resolve like Sarah Imenu, Sarah our mother, to keep going through the good, the bad, the great, the untenable, the joyful, and the seemingly impossible. Shabbat Shalom.